Now, into our possession has come a whole bundle of documents going back to the implementation of the Human Rights Act in 1998. And what is really interesting about these documents, as the ECHR is written into British law, and as we debate what's going to happen, what it's going to mean, we were given some very strong reassurances. For example, Blair's Lord Chancellor at the time, Derry Irvine, said in the House of Lords in 1997, "We believe that Clause 2 gets it right in requiring domestic courts to take into account judgments of the European Court, but not making them binding." I think that binding certainly goes further than the convention itself requires. So, guys, it's all going to be okay. And the Home Secretary, Jack Straw, in 1998, at the moment this was passing through the House of Commons, said British judges will be enabled to make a distinctively British contribution to the development of jurisprudence of human rights across Europe. Namely, folks, it's all going to be great. We're in charge. We'll set the pace and everybody else will follow us. And so it goes through. The Human Rights Act of 1998 goes through and becomes law. Yet, never seen before, a book published in 1999, as shown on this channel by our political editor Christopher Hope an hour or two ago, European Human Rights Law. You'll never guess who wrote it. Yes, it was our Prime Minister. There he is on your screens, a very young-looking Keir Starmer, and he was the one that wrote this book. He designed it to be a handbook, a guidebook for the implementation of human rights law into the British legal system. And he said this: "Above all else, the Human Rights Act represents a new way of thinking about law, politics, and the relationship between public authorities and individuals. Its potential is enormous. Its effectiveness depends on the combined willingness of us all to approach decision-making from a human rights perspective." So there you are. There was the Prime Minister, despite the assurances we've been given by Home Secretaries, by Lord Chancellors, just a year after its implementation, saying, actually, do you know what? The entire legal system should be based on these texts. And indeed, as it says, European. And that's the key. European human rights law.
Just 3 minutes ago, Nigel Farage unleashed absolute devastation on Keir Starmer during a live television broadcast that has left the Prime Minister visibly shaken and his entire government scrambling for damage control. What Farage revealed on national television is so explosive, so damaging, that Downing Street has gone into total panic mode. This wasn't just another political debate. This was a complete and utter demolition of Starmer's credibility, and the fallout is already tearing through Westminster like a tornado. You need to see exactly what Farage exposed and why Starmer is absolutely terrified right now. The television studio fell into stunned silence as Nigel Farage delivered what political insiders are already calling the most devastating takedown of a sitting Prime Minister in modern British history. Just minutes ago, during a live political debate programme, Farage produced evidence that has left Keir Starmer's government reeling and thrown British politics into absolute chaos. The cameras captured every moment as Farage methodically laid out his case, building to a crescendo that left other panellists speechless and viewers across Britain watching in absolute disbelief. This wasn't the usual political point scoring or rhetorical flourishes that we're used to seeing. This was something far more serious, far more damaging, and far more dangerous for the Prime Minister. Farage came prepared with documents, with receipts, with evidence that he's been holding close to his chest for weeks. The moment he began speaking, you could see the shift in the studio atmosphere. Other guests leaned forward in their seats. The host's expression changed from casual moderation to intense focus. And across the country, millions of viewers stopped whatever they were doing to watch this political earthquake unfold in real time. Farage has always been a formidable political operator, but what he unleashed tonight was on a completely different level. He didn't just criticise Starmer's policies or question his judgment. He exposed something that goes to the very heart of the Prime Minister's integrity and honesty. The specific allegations that Farage made are absolutely explosive. He revealed information about Starmer's actions before becoming Prime Minister, decisions and connections that directly contradict the image Starmer has carefully cultivated as a man of principle and integrity. Farage produced evidence suggesting that Starmer made promises to certain groups and individuals during the election campaign that he knew he couldn't keep, that he never intended to keep. The documentation Farage waved in front of the cameras appeared to show communications, agreements and commitments that Starmer has since completely abandoned or outright denied ever making. The accusation is clear. Starmer lied his way into Downing Street, and now the truth is catching up with him. But it gets worse. Farage didn't stop at broken promises. He went further, alleging that Starmer has been meeting secretly with figures and organisations that would horrify Labour voters if they knew about it. According to Farage's claims, which he says he can back up with evidence, Starmer has been having private discussions with corporate interests, foreign entities and political operators whose agendas are completely at odds with what Labour campaigned on. The implication is devastating, that Starmer is not the honest, straightforward leader he pretends to be, but rather a calculating politician who says one thing in public while doing something completely different behind closed doors. If Farage's allegations are true, this is a betrayal of the voters who put their trust in Starmer. The Prime Minister's office has been desperately trying to respond, but their initial statements have been weak and unconvincing. Within minutes of Farage's live television exposure, Downing Street issued a brief statement calling the allegations baseless and politically motivated. But political observers are noting that the statement didn't actually deny the specific claims Farage made. It didn't address the evidence he presented. It didn't explain away the documents he showed on camera. This kind of vague defensive response is often a sign that a government knows it's in serious trouble and is buying time to figure out how to respond properly. The longer Starmer waits to give a full, detailed rebuttal, the more guilty he looks. Social media has exploded in the aftermath of Farage's revelations. Within minutes, the hashtags related to the exposure were trending at #1 across all platforms. Video clips of Farage's most damning moments are being shared millions of times. Political commentators are scrambling to analyse what this means. Opposition MPs are demanding emergency statements in Parliament. The media feeding frenzy has begun, and it's only going to intensify as more details emerge. This is the kind of political moment that defines careers and destroys reputations. For Farage, it's a triumphant vindication of his persistent criticism of Starmer. For the Prime Minister, it's potentially a career-ending catastrophe. What makes this exposure particularly damaging is the timing. Starmer's government is already facing multiple crises: economic challenges, policy failures, internal party tensions, and plummeting approval ratings. The last thing he needed was a major scandal about his personal integrity and honesty. But that's exactly what Farage has delivered. And the timing couldn't be worse. When a government is already weak and vulnerable, a scandal like this can be fatal. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back, the tipping point that turns manageable problems into an existential crisis. Starmer's team knows this, which is why the panic in Downing Street right now is reportedly absolute and overwhelming. The other guests on the television programme struggled to respond to Farage's allegations. Some tried to defend Starmer, but their arguments sounded hollow and unconvincing when confronted with the evidence Farage was presenting. Others sat in silence, clearly unsure how to process what they were hearing. The host attempted to challenge Farage on his sources and the credibility of his evidence, but Farage was ready for every question. He calmly explained where his information came from, how he verified it, and why he's confident in its accuracy. This wasn't a wild conspiracy theory or a baseless smear. This was a carefully prepared, meticulously researched exposure of alleged wrongdoing at the highest levels of British government. Political analysts who are watching this unfold are comparing it to some of the biggest political scandals in British history. The exposure has echoes of previous moments when prime ministers were caught in serious controversies that destroyed their credibility. But what makes this different is that it's happening in the age of social media and 24-hour news cycles. Information spreads faster, pressure builds more quickly, and there's nowhere to hide. Starmer can't wait for the news cycle to move on because it won't move on. This story has legs, it has momentum, and it's going to dominate headlines for days or weeks to come. The question isn't whether this will damage Starmer, it's how much damage it will do and whether he can survive it. Opposition parties are lining up to capitalise on this moment. Conservative MPs are preparing parliamentary questions demanding that Starmer come to the House of Commons to address these allegations directly. They're calling for investigations, for inquiries, for full transparency about Starmer's actions and connections. The Liberal Democrats are echoing these demands, adding their voices to the chorus calling for accountability. Even some Labour MPs are reportedly privately expressing concern about what Farage has revealed, worried that this could taint the entire party and damage their own electoral prospects. When a Prime Minister starts losing the confidence of his own backbenchers, that's when real trouble begins. The media reaction has been swift and brutal. News channels have broken into regular programming to cover Farage's explosive revelations. Political editors are calling it a bombshell that could reshape British politics. Front pages are being rewritten for tomorrow's newspapers. Every major news organisation has dispatched reporters to Downing Street, to Parliament, to anywhere they might get reaction or additional information. The story is everywhere, unavoidable, dominating every news bulletin and political discussion. For Starmer, this is a nightmare scenario, a scandal that's so big, so explosive, that it consumes everything else and makes it impossible to govern effectively. What's particularly clever about Farage's approach is that he didn't reveal everything at once. During the live broadcast, he made it clear that what he presented was just the beginning, that he has more evidence, more documentation, more revelations waiting to come out. This is a classic political strategy, drip-feeding damaging information over time to keep the story alive and maintain pressure on your target. Did voters make their decision based on false information and broken promises? Were they deceived about who Starmer really is and what he really stands for? These questions strike at the heart of democratic legitimacy. They suggest that the current government doesn't have a genuine mandate because it was elected under false pretences. Opposition parties are already saying these arguments, and they're resonating with voters who feel betrayed and angry. Inside Labour Party headquarters, the mood is reportedly one of shock and crisis management. Party officials are trying to assess the damage, figure out how to respond, and prevent this from spiralling into something even worse. They're organising rapid response teams, preparing talking points for MPs and supporters, and desperately trying to counteract the narrative that Farage has created. But it's an uphill battle. When you're playing defence, when you're responding to allegations rather than setting the agenda, you've already lost the initiative. And in politics, losing the initiative can be fatal. Labour knows they need to turn this around quickly, but they're not sure how to do it when the evidence against them seems so damaging. Public opinion is shifting rapidly in response to Farage's revelations. Polls conducted immediately after the broadcast are showing a sharp drop in Starmer's approval ratings and a corresponding rise in support for Reform UK and other opposition parties. Voters who gave Starmer the benefit of the doubt are now questioning everything they thought they knew about him. Trust, once lost, is incredibly difficult to rebuild in politics. Even if Starmer manages to refute some of Farage's allegations, the damage to his reputation may already be irreversible. People will remember the scandal, the accusations, the sense that something wasn't quite right. That perception is poison for a political leader. The specific documents that Farage produced during the live broadcast are now being scrutinised by journalists and political analysts across the country. Freeze frames from the television footage are being examined, zoomed in on, analysed for every detail. What can be seen in these documents appears to corroborate at least some of Farage's claims. There are what look like email exchanges, meeting notes and agreements that suggest Starmer made commitments that he's since walked away from. Whether these documents are authentic and whether they prove what Farage claims they prove will be debated intensely in the coming days. But the fact that Farage felt confident enough to show them on live television suggests he believes they'll withstand scrutiny. Legal experts are now weighing in on whether any of the alleged behaviour could constitute actual wrongdoing beyond just political hypocrisy. Are there legal implications to making promises and then breaking them? Could there be violations of electoral law if Starmer misrepresented his positions during the campaign? What about the secret meetings Farage alleges took place? Were any rules or regulations broken? These are questions that investigators and lawyers will need to examine carefully. But even if everything Starmer did was technically legal, the political damage from the perception of dishonesty and betrayal could be just as devastating as any legal consequences. Nigel Farage has positioned himself perfectly through this exposure. He's painted himself as the truth teller, the fearless politician willing to speak uncomfortable truths that the establishment wants to hide. His supporters are celebrating him as a hero who's finally exposing the corruption and dishonesty they've long suspected exists in Westminster. For Reform UK, this is a massive boost. The party has struggled to break through in some areas, but a moment like this gives them ammunition for months of campaigning. They can point to Farage's exposure of Starmer as evidence that only they are willing to challenge the political establishment and fight for ordinary voters. The Conservative Party is walking a delicate line in their response. On one hand, they are delighted to see Starmer in trouble and are eager to pile on the pressure. On the other hand, they don't want to be seen as simply following Farage's lead or boosting Reform UK's profile. Senior Conservative figures are making statements that echo Farage's concerns, but frame them in their own terms, emphasising traditional Conservative values of honesty and accountability. They're trying to benefit from Starmer's crisis without giving Farage too much credit. It's a complicated political dance, and how successfully they execute it could determine whether they or Reform UK become the primary beneficiaries of Starmer's problems. Inside Starmer's inner circle, there are reportedly fierce debates about how to respond. Some advisors are pushing for an aggressive counterattack, demanding that Starmer go on television tonight to forcefully rebut Farage's allegations and call him a liar. Others are counselling caution, arguing that rushing out a response without having all the facts straight could make things worse. There's also discussion about whether to threaten legal action against Farage for defamation, but lawyers are apparently warning that such a move could backfire spectacularly if Farage's evidence is solid. The Prime Minister is caught between bad options, trying to decide which approach will do the least damage. The impact on Labour's policy agenda is immediate and severe. Everything the government was trying to accomplish has now been pushed to the side as this scandal consumes all the oxygen in Westminster. Important legislation is being ignored. Policy announcements are being postponed. Ministers who should be out selling the government's achievements are instead being asked to defend the Prime Minister's integrity on news programmes. This is how scandals destroy governments, not necessarily by forcing immediate resignations, but by making it impossible to govern effectively. When all your time and energy goes into crisis management and scandal response, you can't do the actual work of governing. International reaction to Farage's exposure is starting to filter through. Foreign governments and international media are reporting on the scandal with varying degrees of shock and concern. Some international allies are watching nervously, worried about whether Britain's government will be too weakened by this crisis to be an effective partner on the world stage. Others are taking a wait-and-see approach, withholding judgment until more facts emerge. But make no mistake, this scandal is damaging Britain's international reputation. Foreign leaders prefer to deal with strong, stable governments, not ones embroiled in scandals about integrity and honesty. Every day this crisis continues is another day that Britain looks chaotic and unreliable to the rest of the world. The question of Farage's sources is fascinating political observers. Where did he get this information? Who gave him these documents? Is there a whistleblower inside the government or the Labour Party who's feeding him damaging material? Or did Farage's team conduct their own investigation, digging through public records and connecting dots that others missed? Understanding the source of Farage's information is crucial because it will determine how much more he might have waiting to release. If he's got an insider source with access to sensitive information, there could be more bombshells coming. That possibility is keeping Starmer's team up at night. Social media has become a battleground where supporters and opponents of Starmer are fighting viciously over the truth of Farage's allegations. Pro-Labour accounts are calling it a smear campaign, a politically motivated attack with no substance. They're questioning Farage's credibility, pointing to his history of controversial statements and positions. Anti-Starmer voices are celebrating what they see as long overdue accountability, sharing the clips of Farage's exposure millions of times and demanding that the Prime Minister resign. The online debate is toxic, polarised and incredibly intense. Public opinion is being shaped in real time through these social media battles, and both sides know how important it is to win the information war. Traditional media is trying to verify Farage's claims independently, but that takes time. Journalists are making calls, checking sources, requesting official documents and trying to build their own picture of what actually happened. Some news organisations are reportedly close to confirming at least parts of Farage's allegations, which would add significant credibility to his claims and put even more pressure on Starmer. Other outlets are finding inconsistencies or questions about the interpretation of the evidence Farage presented. This investigative work will continue for days, and each new revelation or contradiction will drive the next news cycle and keep the scandal alive. The parliamentary arithmetic is crucial here. Labour has a massive majority, which means Starmer can't be removed through a vote of no confidence unless there's a massive rebellion within his own party. Right now, that seems unlikely. Most Labour MPs are publicly standing by the Prime Minister, despite any private concerns they might have. But majorities can crumble quickly when scandals mount and poll numbers collapse. MPs are ultimately interested in their own political survival, and if standing by Starmer starts to look like electoral suicide, those calculations could change rapidly. Starmer's grip on power depends not just on the facts of what he did or didn't do, but on whether his MPs believe he's still an electoral asset or has become a liability. The impact on upcoming by-elections and local elections cannot be overstated. Labour was already facing difficult electoral tests in the coming months, and this scandal makes those challenges exponentially harder. Opposition parties now have powerful ammunition to use against Labour candidates. They can point to Farage's exposure and ask voters whether they really trust Labour after what's been revealed about Starmer. Every campaign leaflet, every doorstep conversation, every local debate will be dominated by this scandal. Labour candidates across the country are privately furious that Starmer's alleged behaviour is making their jobs so much harder. If Labour starts losing seats, they should be winning. The pressure on Starmer will become unbearable. Corporate and financial interests are also watching this unfold with concern. Business leaders who were cautiously optimistic about working with Starmer's government are now reassessing. Scandals create uncertainty, and uncertainty is bad for business. Investment decisions get delayed, expansion plans get put on hold, and confidence in the government's stability erodes. The economic consequences of political chaos are real and measurable. If this scandal drags on for weeks or months, it could have genuine impacts on economic growth, business confidence, and Britain's attractiveness to international investors. Starmer came into office promising stability and competence, but this crisis delivers the opposite. The entertainment and commentary value of this political drama is also worth noting. Television audiences for political programmes are surging as people tune in to watch the latest developments. Podcasters and YouTubers are producing content analysing every angle of the scandal. Late-night comedy shows are writing jokes about it. The British public is engaged with politics in a way they haven't been for months, captivated by the drama of a Prime Minister under siege and a maverick politician who's exposed him on live television. This kind of political theatre, while serious in its implications, also becomes a cultural moment that transcends normal political discourse. As the hours tick by since Farage's explosive live television exposure, more information is starting to emerge from various sources. Investigative journalists who have been looking into Starmer's background are now coming forward with their own findings that seem to corroborate at least some of what Farage alleged. These independent confirmations are incredibly damaging because they suggest Farage wasn't just making wild accusations. He was revealing genuine wrongdoing that others are now able to verify. Each new piece of corroborating evidence makes Starmer's position more precarious and his denials less credible. The legal ramifications are starting to become clearer as lawyers analyse the situation. While much of what Farage alleged might not constitute criminal behaviour, there are potential violations of electoral regulations, transparency requirements, and ethical guidelines that govern how politicians should conduct themselves. Complaints are already being filed with various regulatory bodies, BEIS and electoral commissions. These investigations will take months to complete, but the very fact that they're happening keeps the scandal in the news and maintains pressure on Starmer. He'll be fighting this battle on multiple fronts: political, legal, and in the court of public opinion. Inside the Labour Party, divisions are starting to emerge. Some MPs are publicly defending Starmer with fierce loyalty, attacking Farage and questioning his motives and credibility. But others are staying conspicuously silent, refusing to be drawn on the allegations or giving carefully worded statements that don't actually defend the Prime Minister. This silence is deafening. In politics, when your colleagues won't defend you, it's often because they don't believe you're defendable. The longer some Labour MPs stay silent, the more obvious it becomes that they have serious concerns about what Farage has revealed. The pressure is building for Starmer to make a major public statement addressing these allegations in detail. A brief written statement from Downing Street isn't going to cut it anymore. The public and the media are demanding to see Starmer face questions, explain himself, and either refute the allegations convincingly or admit wrongdoing and accept consequences. Every hour that passes without a comprehensive response makes him look more guilty and more cowardly. His advisors know he needs to face the music, but they're terrified that he'll make the situation worse if he gives a bad interview or can't adequately explain away the evidence Farage presented. Farage himself is riding high on the success of his exposure. He's giving interviews to every media outlet that will have him, expanding on his allegations and promising more revelations to come. He's being celebrated by his supporters as a political giant who single-handedly brought down a prime minister. Whether that celebration is premature remains to be seen. Starmer hasn't actually fallen yet, but the momentum is absolutely with Farage right now. He's controlling the narrative, setting the agenda, and keeping Starmer perpetually on the defensive. In political warfare, that's about as good a position as you can be in.